Welcome to the Mountain View Safety Services Hazard Communication Lesson. Purpose: to ensure that information on hazardous chemicals entering the workplace is transmitted to affected employees. This information will be transmitted to employees by means of labels on containers, material safety data sheets, or MSDSs, and training for the affected employees. This program provides a procedure for informing Mountain View Safety Services employees and contractors of the hazardous chemicals which might be encountered while working at a Mountain View facility. This program is designed to meet the requirements of the federal WHMIS legislation. The company's written hazard communication program will be available to all employees or contractors at all times. The written program will be available in the Occupational Health and Safety Manual and upon request by employees. Definitions: container means any bag, barrel, bottle, cylinder, drum, vessel, storage tank, or the like of that contains a hazardous chemical. Label means any written, printed, or graphic material displayed on or affixed to a container of hazardous chemicals. Health hazard means that there is information about a chemical which there is significant statistical evidence that acute or chronic health effects may occur if an employee or contractor is exposed to the chemical. Hazard warning means a word, picture, symbol, or combination appearing on a label or other form of warning which convey the specific hazard or hazards of a chemical. Hazardous chemical: a chemical with the potential to cause acute or chronic physical harm. Material safety data sheet: written or printed material concerning a chemical which is prepared in accordance with the federal WHMIS legislation. Responsibilities: the safety and health of all employees at Mountain View is a responsibility shared by management and employees. The operations manager is responsible for the overall implementation of the hazard communication program. A person designated by the operations manager or members of the company safety committee may perform some of the routine duties required by this procedure. Specific responsibilities are listed in the appropriate sections of this procedure. All employees are responsible for adhering to the following procedures, attending required training, and applying the training when they perform work. Procedures: container labels. All hazardous chemicals entering the workplace shall be labeled with the following information: identity of the hazardous chemical, appropriate hazard warning, name and address of manufacturer, importer, or responsible party. The Site Materials Supply Manager or designee will verify that all hazardous chemicals have received a label that complies with OSHA and OH&S regulations. No container is to be accepted into the facility without the appropriate label. Labels will not be defaced or removed. Every container of hazardous materials in the facility will have the appropriate label attached, including when a material is transferred into a portable container for storage. If the material is transferred as stated, the individual transferring the material is responsible for labeling the container. If a hazardous chemical is transferred into a portable container and will be used immediately by the person that transfers the chemical, that container does not need to be labeled. Unlabeled containers in the facility will be removed, have their contents determined, and labeled properly. If the contents cannot be determined, the containers will be removed and properly disposed of. Procedures: material safety data sheets. Hazardous chemicals will not be purchased without an approved MSDS. The operations manager or designee will verify that there is an approved copy of an MSDS on file for every chemical purchased or received. The operations manager will be responsible for approving all MSDSs prior to purchase. Copies of MSDSs will be maintained in the office. The MSDSs will be available to employees at all times, and employees can obtain a copy of an MSDS at any time. The operations manager or designee is responsible for keeping the MSDS file current. Periodically, at least annually, the operations manager will determine if all MSDSs are current and/or update as needed. Procedures: chemical inventory list. An inventory list of all chemicals shall be maintained with the MSDSs. The operations manager or designee is responsible for maintaining an updated inventory list of all chemicals. Periodically, at least annually, the operations manager will conduct a survey of the facility to ensure that there are MSDSs for all chemicals and the chemicals are included in the chemical inventory list. Procedures: employee information and training. The purpose of hazard communication training is to ensure that the information about chemicals and protective measures concerning chemicals used in Mountain View Safety Services is transmitted to the affected employees or contractors. It is the policy of Mountain View Safety Services to maintain a safe workplace. Accordingly, every employee or contractor is required to comply with company, federal, and provincial safety and health laws, codes, and regulations. All employees shall be trained on the WHMIS legislation and the company's program for implementation. Hazard communication training will be accomplished through the use of lectures, videotapes, printed material, and group discussions. This training will be specific to the company. Procedures. Employee information and training continued. The Hazard Communication Program Administrator is responsible for implementation and facilitating the training. Supervisors are responsible for assuring that all employees receive hazard communication training at least annually. Hazard communication training will include the following topics: the WHMIS legislation, hazardous chemical inventory and where chemicals are used in the facility, the hazard related to use and exposure, the protective measures employees should use to protect themselves, including safe work procedures and practices, emergency procedures, and the use of personal protective equipment, how to read labels and how to use the information, how to recognize hazard warnings, how to use MSDSs, and how to get copies of MSDSs, where the written hazard communication program is located and where MSDSs are maintained. Procedures, employee information and training continued. All employees are required to attend the training sessions. A test or quiz will be given and the results will be maintained as a part of the employee's personal file. All employees, prior to being assigned work, will have to complete hazard communication training, which includes the topics listed above. Employees that are transferred to a new department or location in the facility must receive training concerning chemicals in that work area. Before a new chemical is introduced into the workplace, all affected employees will be trained on the use and hazards of the new chemical, and MSDSs for the new chemical will be made available. Emergency information concerning chemicals in the workplace will be reviewed before assignment and at least annually. After implementation of this procedure, the Hazard Communication Program Administrator will evaluate the effectiveness of each element of this procedure at least annually and ensure that the proper documentation is maintained. Procedures. Hazard determination. Hazard determination of a chemical shall be made prior to purchase based on evaluation of the MSDS from the manufacturer by the Hazard Communication Program Administrator. Non-routine tasks, plant personnel. Before a non-routine task that may have potential for employee exposure to a hazardous chemical is performed, the employee must be advised by a supervisor of the hazards of exposure for that chemical and the precautionary measures to take. The employee should be told of the following: chemical name and hazards, required personal protective equipment, precautionary measures to take, emergency procedures, any toxicity, oxygen, combustible readings taken, requirements for ventilation, special tools or equipment required. Non-routine tasks, contractors. It is the responsibility of the Hazard Communication Program Administrator to advise contractors of their responsibilities as specified in this procedure. The Hazard Communication Program Administrator will provide the contractor the following information: a list of hazardous chemicals in the workplace, precautionary measures to take, location of MSDSs, emergency procedures for working with the chemical. Appropriate MSDSs will be supplied to contractors. The MSDSs will be given to the contractor representative responsible for their employee training safety. Contractors will be required to provide MSDSs for all hazardous chemicals prior to bringing into a Mountain View Safety Services facility. The MSDSs must be given to the Hazard Communication Program Administrator and Operations Manager for prior approval prior to bringing the chemicals into the facility. Contractors are required to comply with all provisions of this procedure.